Department of Truth, issue number 14. So it feels like it's been a hot minute since this book came out. It's been a couple months, right? I know, I'm going to assume they just like put it off a bit because they were dropping volume 2 of the trade. And with that, I was like, interesting. Because where were issues 6 and 7 in either of the first trades? I don't like that at all. That kind of bothers me, unless they're going to do like an anthology thing where all like the standalone books come out. Who knows? So this time around, Martin Simmons is not doing the artwork. We got John J. Pearson over here. And this is a very fascinating story. It's kind of like explaining pretty much everything that's happening, or pretty much like one interpretation of what actually happened to create this world this way. I'm going to do my best to explain that to you guys because it's a lot to take in. And first off, you have to pretty much just justify this book's existence. Well, no, okay, you have to put it like this. Magic exists in this universe. They were kind of teasing it before, but in order to like fully grasp what's actually going on in the story now, it's no longer like some government conspiracy kind of stuff. It's literal magic is a thing in this universe. We should accept that. And it's something that's kind of cool. And I did like that. So when it comes to Pearson's artwork, I really dig it. I'm not too familiar with their work, but this looks really clean, really crisp. It does have that Simmons aesthetic, but more cleaned up. It looks like Simmons is very like, dark and brooding and stuff. This was a little more clean. I like the aesthetic a lot. I think it works really well, actually. So we are in, I'm going to assume the 60s sometime. We never explicitly say. And we are just seeing that the kid from issues, what issues was this kid in? Was it 6 and 7 that did the UFO stuff? I can't remember. I think it might have been. But the UFO stuff, that kid with the tinfoil hat, he is with Lee Harvey Oswald. They're in a hotel room somewhere. They're pretty much, he's just reading a newspaper of like, look what Lee Harvey did. He acted on his own. It's like, oh, yeah, sure he did. And in the other room, we see that Lee is shaving his head. And he's trying to just like, cover his identity. But he shaves a little too much and he loses his eyebrows. And the kid's like, dude, really? Bald people have eyebrows, So he cleans it up, and basically they are just headed out on a mission to find out something. But it's kind of like their own personal mission and not really something that they're doing for the actual government. It's more just like, Department of Truth subsidy, just really, really intense shit. And it's kind of just like, that's a lot. And they're just kind of having a conversation of like, do they believe in magic? And, Harvey's like, we kind of have to. This line of work, we should believe in everything. I mean, you're wearing a tinfoil to keep the flying saucers out of your head. You should believe in it too, kid. So they head out on their mission, and we learn that this is the Deviation 3 Rocket Man. So it's like, here's a big part of the book. Deviation, is that what they're calling these kind of like off-kilter stories that don't have anything to do with the actual like progression of the book? I don't know. Maybe it does. Who knows? This could just be like the origins of where we're getting the Scarlet Woman from. So they're headed to the country. They're passing this kid who has a cigarette in his mouth. They're like, that kid's probably going to be somebody important. They end up in this like weird, this back of the woods trailer. They find this guy. And they're like, yeah, well, I didn't want you guys to find me. You working for the government? It's like, no, we're not, sir. Well, kind of. We're kind of on our own thing. And we're just here to ask you. We want to know about the Babylon working. He's like, what kind of government are you? It's like deep state shit. Can you talk to us about this? He's like, yeah, boy, we're headed down. This guy's like, yeah, whatever. I don't give a shit. So they head down to this bunker that's underneath the trailer. And basically what follows is this interpretation of kind of the origin in the modern era of the Scarlet Woman. We know she's been around forever because of that book that like predates like the Roman Catholic Church and all that stuff. But this is kind of just like, in terms of the bubble bursting with the American dream, it's kind of like how that idea came into prominence for the Scarlet Woman. And it's very interesting. So there's a bunch of key players in here we have to remember. We talked about Crawley in the previous book, how he interpreted all this stuff, very satanic and everything like that. He's a key player in like the origin of the Scarlet Woman in the modern context. Another one is Jack Parsons, who is just like this, I think he's like a physician or somebody that works on like the space stuff and everything. We also have to keep an eye on the king of Scientology himself, Hubbard. And you're just like, okay, so we got Crawley, Parsons, and Hubbard to worry about here. How do these guys make everything work in terms of like, the modern era of stuff going forward? So basically, these two men, we learned that Parsons and Hubbard were kind of like big fans of Crawley. They just kind of like loved what he was working on there. They thought it was kind of very interesting and cool, and they were just like studying his ideas, but kind of turning it into more these weird meta-contextual bullshit things about like, how weird everything is, like magical and like sexy and just like disgusting and perverted and all that stuff. And of course, one of the men being somebody of science and the other one being the science fiction writer, they instantly connected and they started like building this thing with each other that could work for terms of what they were creating. And it's just like kind of like diluting, occult shit and turning it into this one thing. We see that this old man explains that magic is real and it's something we have to worry about, and it's just kind of like affecting all this stuff. And basically, it's just like these two dudes trying to find a way to interact and like connect on a spiritual, metaphysical, disgusting level with the divine feminine. I think it's feminine. And basically, like, that's the Scarlet Woman. She's like physically the biggest, thing in the world in an essence. It's kind of like, whoa, it's weird. It's weird. So we see, just like history, like everybody was like deep into the occult shit, like Hitler and his top men were part of it. They were doing shit that Churchill never understood. Crawley was trying to help him out there. So, you got like these two guys, a rocket scientist and a science fiction writer, who are just obsessed with the work of this guy. And it's like the way he's trying to summon the divine feminine in earnest. You're just like, this is crazy. And this old guy kind of explains it like, you're trying to summon an angel, but you accidentally summon God. That's too much power for you to understand. How do you do that? So you try to like persuade it into actually being an angel, so you can kind of like grasp your head around the idea of divinity and everything. And you're just like, whoa, take a moment to step back and think about that for a second. That's a lot to deal with. And basically, it's that, but for the American dream. They were trying to kind of like create this idea of God, but as the American dream conceived, and like that to them was like the divine feminine, so they tried to summon this Scarlet Woman. So, these two jerk-offs went to the desert. One of them started like, boop-a-doo-booping his way out there to see what's going to happen. The other one's like, I'm going to write all this shit down and keep the door open. Parsons and Hubbard were doing all this weird shit. And then as they just like did this like weird ritual to summon like the goddess of the American dream, out came the Scarlet Woman, and she just like set it free, and it's just all this insane stuff. And because of this, you had things like, flying saucers crashing all over New Mexico. You had this Cold War starting. You had the Iron Curtain go up. You had like the bulletin of the scientists create the doomsday clock and set it at 7 minutes to midnight. It's like, because this guy jerked off in the desert with like the leader of Scientology, we released this crazy woman who's set upon to destroy all of the world, and starts with the death of the American dream. That's a lot to deal with. That is a lot of shit to deal with. And I'm just like, well, okay, that's crazy. And then, as the story progresses, we see, like Crawley dies, and he doesn't really like Parsons or Hubbard, and they're just kind of like insane people. He's like, you guys really screwed the pooch on this one. Like, why would you try to do this? And basically, I think it's hilarious that like the destroyers of the world are a rocket scientist and his weird Scientology wielding friend. I'm like, that is just perfect deep state shit, and it works so well for this book. So as this guy keeps talking, he's like, because of this action and this weird stuff of these guys trying to find God and trying to summon all this stuff, we're all going to burn. They literally set upon, like, this is Babylon's country now. This is the Eon of Horus. This is the new age of the world. She's going to kill us all. This is the end of the world. We're all going to die in a lake of fire. It's going to swallow us up, and we all deserve it. And this guy's like, all right, I'm done. You guys can get out of my bunker now. So they leave, and it's kind of like, you believe any of that? Who really knows what we believe here, kid? You're still wearing tinfoil, so there might be something in there. And earlier on in the book, we had this thing where Lee was kind of just like explaining, or had this energy about him where something happened while he was in Dallas. And this kid's asking, like, what happened to you? Did you see something in Dallas? And he says, yes, I did, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. Well, we see what Lee saw in Dallas, and what it was is when he's in the room where he killed JFK from, or like the version of him killed JFK from, the woman in red. The Scarlet Woman is holding the gun. She's like, do you see? It's important that you see. Thus confirming that Lee Harvey Oswald believes in all of this magic and believes that the Scarlet Woman exists because he's seen her. And they're about to take off, and we see that the kid from the beginning is like, just take me with you. This guy's nuts. I do not want to be a part of his life. Let me go. He might try to eat me. Lee's like, kid, you should just stay here, bunker down, and get things right, and maybe you'll learn something from him. What's your name, kid? He's like, Hawk Harrison. So this little kid that Lee meets here, his name's Hawk Harrison, and Lee's just like, kid, one day you might take everything that this guy could teach you, and I'll come find you again. Does that sound good? He's like, who gives a shit? Sure, why not? And that is where this issue ends. And I understand why it's called like the Deviation, because it's not like a big part of the story. It's just kind of explaining how like the death of the American dream came by from these two guys that wanted to take us into space. And that's kind of fascinating to see. And it's just like a very cool concept. Like that's how you summoned the Scarlet Woman to return to our times. It kind of plays itself like there was the break when she first existed and then she came back now and we never seen her since. Very cool stuff. And the artwork, again, is very strong. I do like seeing Pearson's artwork. It is different than Simmons, but comparable in a way where it's just so different than everything else on the shelf that I just adore it. The colors look great. The writing is very strong again. If this is like, just a standalone issue, it's very cool, very forthcoming, and I just adore it. Oh, the pages are so good. I'll put them up, of course, so you can see some really cool stuff with the artwork. It's just an incredibly unique read, and I just love the idea of, like, again, a lot of events in the world, especially when it comes to conspiracy stuff, starts with the death of JFK and, like, his death signaling the end of the American dream, like that white picket fence, that lifestyle that everybody could have, kind of ended because of it. The world changed because of that. We had so much just random shit happen. And I think that's really cool to see in these kind of books. JFK and Oswald are getting a lot of play in comics right now, which is kind of impressive to see. I guess everyone just wants to write their interpretation of that world, which I understand. It's something a lot of people want to go back to explore. So good on you, man. This was a fun read, very interesting, and just shows how the Red Woman is going to bring apart the end of the world, which could be a fun thing to explore in further issues. So the Department of Truth, issue number 14. I am going to give an 8 out of 10. Now, thank you guys for watching this review. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.